Imagine stepping into a dimly lit room, centuries old, where the air is thick with the scent of ink and parchment. The only sound is the scratch of a quill against vellum as a hooded figure hunches over a desk, laboring by candlelight to preserve knowledge that might otherwise vanish into the shadows of time. This was the world of medieval scribes, guardians of secrets, creators of mysteries, and the silent architects of some of history's most enigmatic texts. Among their works lie 30 codices so baffling, so dripping with riddles and hidden meanings that even today, historians and cryptographers still grapple to unlock their secrets. These aren't just books, they're time capsules whispering to us across the ages, daring us to decipher their puzzles. What if I told you that within these weathered pages lie clues to lost histories, forbidden knowledge, or even prophecies that defy explanation? Some of these manuscripts are adorned with bizarre illustrations, creatures that shouldn't exist, maps of places no one has ever seen, and scripts in languages that no scholar can fully translate. Take the Voynich Manuscript, for instance, a book written entirely in an unknown alphabet, filled with plants that don't match any known species, and diagrams of celestial bodies that don't align with any recorded astronomy. Or consider the Codex Gigas, the so-called Devil's Bible, a massive tome rumored to have been penned in a single night with the help of supernatural forces. These aren't just curiosities, they're windows into a medieval mindset that saw the world as a place of wonder, danger, and divine mystery. But why should we care about these ancient puzzles today? Because hidden in their cryptic lines and cryptic illustrations might be answers to questions we've long forgotten to ask. They challenge our assumptions about the past, forcing us to reconsider what we think we know about history, science, and even human ingenuity. Over the next few minutes, we'll journey together through the shadowy corridors of medieval scriptoriums, unraveling the stories behind these 30 enigmatic codices. We'll meet the scribes who risked everything to create them, explore the bizarre theories surrounding their origins, and ask the most tantalizing question of all: what if these books were never meant to be understood by ordinary minds? This isn't just a history lesson. It's a detective story, a treasure hunt, and a glimpse into a world where the line between the sacred and the supernatural was razor thin. So light a candle, lean in close, and let's begin. The Voynich Manuscript isn't just a mystery, it's a labyrinth of unanswered questions wrapped in vellum. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, this peculiar book has baffled scholars for generations with its unreadable script, a language unlike any other known to history. Flipping through its pages feels like stepping into an alien botany textbook. Strange, twisting plants with bulbous roots and spindly leaves fill the illustrations, yet none match any known species on Earth. Some resemble hybrids of real flora, while others seem plucked straight from a fever dream. Even more puzzling are the celestial charts, constellations that don't align with any known medieval astronomy, as if the scribe mapped the stars of another world. And then there's the writing itself. Hundreds of delicate characters flow across the pages in tidy lines, a script so consistent it clearly follows rules, yet no one has ever cracked its code. Cryptographers, linguists, and even wartime codebreakers have thrown themselves at the manuscript, from Renaissance scholars to modern supercomputers. Some claimed breakthroughs, but none held up to scrutiny. Was it a cipher, a lost language, or something far stranger? Theories swirl like ink in water. Maybe it's an alchemist's notebook hiding secret formulas behind its cryptic script. Others argue it's a psychological weapon designed to frustrate and mislead. Then there's the hoax hypothesis that some clever forger crafted it centuries ago to dupe wealthy collectors. But if it's a fake, why pour such painstaking detail into pages no one could read? The truth might be even more intriguing. Recent research suggests the manuscript structure follows linguistic patterns, hinting at genuine meaning buried beneath the symbols. Could it be a medicinal compendium from a forgotten culture, a religious text for a secret sect? Every answer only births new questions, and that's the allure of the Voynich. It refuses to surrender its secrets, standing as a silent challenge across 600 years. Whoever wrote it left behind more than a book. They left a ghost whispering just beyond the edge of understanding. And that's what keeps us coming back, turning the pages again and again, hoping one day the cipher will finally break. While the Voynich Manuscript taunts us with its unreadable script, another book lies waiting in the shadows, one just as baffling yet far less known. The Voynich Codex, discovered in 18th century Hungary, is a leather-bound mystery wrapped in layers of ink and controversy. At first glance, its pages seem familiar, a medieval manuscript filled with delicate illustrations. But look closer and the illusion shatters. The text is written in a script unlike any other, a jumble of symbols that dance across the parchment in tight, rhythmic rows. Unlike the Voynich, which feels methodical, the Voynich's writing has a chaotic energy, as if the scribe's hand moved with urgent purpose, and the illustrations. A surreal blend of crucifixions and battle scenes, saints sharing pages with soldiers, as though the sacred and the violent were two sides of the same coin. Scholars have clashed for centuries over where and when this codex truly came from. Some argue it's a genuine medieval relic, citing the vellum's age and the fading pigments that match period techniques. Others insist it's an elaborate hoax crafted by a clever forger to deceive collectors hungry for lost knowledge. The debate hinges on one stubborn fact: no one has convincingly deciphered its text. A handful of researchers claim breakthroughs linking it to Old Hungarian, Dacian, even an early form of Sanskrit, but none of these theories hold up under scrutiny. The script remains a locked door, and every attempted key has snapped in the lock. Yet the codex offers fleeting glimpses of meaning. One illustration shows a figure kneeling before a cross, surrounded by symbols resembling early Christian iconography. Another depicts warriors with curved blades, their helmets oddly reminiscent of Ottoman designs. Could this be a religious text smuggled out of a war zone? A warrior's prayer book, the mix of imagery defies simple categorization, fueling wild speculation. One particularly chilling theory suggests the Voynich was created by a secretive sect, encoding their beliefs to avoid persecution. Another posits it's a fragmented travelogue, recording encounters with cultures now lost to time. What makes the Voynich so mesmerizing isn't just its unsolved riddle, it's the way it refuses to fit neatly into history. Unlike the Voynich, which feels deliberately opaque, the Voynich seems to whisper, almost intelligible, as if we're one insight away from understanding. And that's the torment of it. Every time a researcher thinks they've spotted a pattern, the codex shifts, revealing yet another layer of mystery. Whether medieval masterpiece or masterful forgery, it challenges our hunger for answers, reminding us that some secrets guard themselves too well. Of all the strange manuscripts left behind by medieval scribes, none carries a legend quite as chilling as the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. The name alone sends a shiver down the spine, but this isn't just some spooky folktale. The book itself is real, a colossal tome weighing over 160 pounds, stretching nearly 3 feet in height and requiring 2 people just to lift it. Legend claims it was penned by a single monk in a single night, a feat so impossible it could only have been achieved with supernatural aid. According to the story, this monk, condemned to death for breaking his vows, struck a desperate bargain. If he could transcribe all human knowledge in one night, his life would be spared. But as the hours slipped away and the task grew hopeless, he called upon the devil himself to finish the work, and in return, the monk offered his soul. Whether you believe the tale or not, the physical reality of the Codex Gigas is staggering. Its pages contain an entire medieval library in one volume, the complete Latin Bible, historical chronicles, medical texts, even a guide to exorcisms. Yet one page stands out, stopping every reader in their tracks, a full-page illustration of the devil himself. Towering and grotesque, with clawed hands, emerald skin, and a haunting grin, this image wasn't tucked away in some obscure corner. It sits boldly in the manuscript, facing a depiction of the heavenly city, as if to taunt the reader with the eternal struggle between good and evil. Why include such a blasphemous image in a sacred text? Some argue it served as a warning against temptation. Others whisper it was the devil's price, his likeness forever bound to the book as proof of their pact. Historically, we know the Codex Gigas was crafted in the early 13th century at the Benedictine monastery of Podlages in Bohemia, not in a single night but over years of painstaking labor. The idea of a lone scribe completing it so quickly is of course impossible, but the legend persists because it speaks to something deeper, the medieval fascination with the thin line between divine inspiration and diabolical intervention. Monasteries were places of intense spiritual labor where scribes worked in isolation for years, sometimes decades. To outsiders, their ability to produce such flawless manuscripts might have seemed otherworldly. Perhaps the Devil's Bible legend was born from that awe, or perhaps from the scribe's own exhaustion, staring at the endless vellum, wondering if the work would ever end. Today, the Codex Gigas survives as a relic of both piety and superstition. Housed in Sweden's National Library, it still draws scholars and skeptics alike, all searching for clues in its ink-stained pages. Was it truly touched by the supernatural, or is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled convincing us he had a hand in it at all? Either way, the book endures, a monument to human ambition, fear, and the unshakable power of a good story. The Ripley scrolls unfurl like a dream, or a hallucination bursting with colors so vibrant they seem to pulse even after 600 years. Named after Sir George Ripley, a 15th century English alchemist and Augustinian friar, these scrolls are not books but sprawling, hand-painted tapestries of ink and pigment, some stretching over 18 feet long. They don't just describe the quest for the Philosopher's Stone, they show it in dizzying detail. Serpents swallowing their own tails, kings and queens dissolving in bubbling flasks, celestial dragons coiled around cryptic verses. Every inch is dense with symbolism, a visual language meant to convey secrets too dangerous to write plainly. Alchemy wasn't just medieval chemistry, it was a spiritual pursuit, a belief that transforming base metals into gold mirrored the soul's journey toward enlightenment. The Ripley scrolls are a roadmap for that journey, but one written in riddles. Take the recurring image of the green lion, a beast devouring the sun. To the uninitiated, it's sheer nonsense, but to alchemists it represented a crucial step in their work, the dissolution of raw matter, a violent breakdown before rebirth. Even the scroll's recipes, phrased as poetry, are layered with double meanings. A line like, "Take the red man and his white wife," might sound like folklore, but it's code for combining mercury and sulfur, the foundational ingredients of alchemical transformation. What makes these scrolls so tantalizing is their ambiguity. Were they practical guides meant to be followed step by step in a smoky workshop, or were they meditative objects designed to provoke spiritual revelation through contemplation? The truth might be both. Ripley himself wrote that alchemy required patience, prayer, and purification of the heart, hinting that the real Philosopher's Stone wasn't a physical object but inner wisdom. Yet the scrolls also include shockingly precise instructions, like distilling the blood of the red dragon, likely a reference to cinnabar, a mercury-rich mineral in vessels sealed with virgin wax. Their influence stretches far beyond medieval monasteries. Centuries later, occultists like John Dee and Elias Ashmole pored over Ripley's symbols, convinced they held lost wisdom. Even Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, copied passages from the scrolls by hand, searching for hidden truths. Today, scholars still debate whether Ripley authored them or if they're the work of followers, weaving his legacy into something even he might not recognize. But perhaps that's the point. Like all great mysteries, the Ripley scrolls refuse to be pinned down their science, art, and prayer all at once. A reminder that the line between madness and genius is often written in symbols we've yet to fully understand. At first glance, the Codex Seraphinianus seems like it was plucked straight from the 13th century, its pages filled with swirling script, intricate illustrations of impossible creatures, and diagrams of nonsensical machines. But here's the twist. This eerie masterpiece wasn't crafted by a medieval monk. It was created in the late 1970s by Italian artist Luigi Serafini, a man who channeled the uncanny spirit of ancient manuscripts into something entirely new. Yet despite its modern origins, the Codex Seraphinianus has become a spiritual successor to the Voynich and Rohank, a deliberate echo of their mysteries that asks the same haunting question: what if a book was designed to resist understanding? Open its pages and you're plunged into a world both familiar and alien. Serafini's art is a parade of surreal visions, fish shaped like violins, trees sprouting human limbs, cities built on the backs of giant snails. Every illustration is rendered with scientific precision, as if documenting a reality that never existed. And then there's the text row after row of flowing, invented script, a language that follows grammatical patterns yet remains utterly indecipherable. Serafini himself claimed the writing has no meaning, calling it automatic, a stream of subconscious shapes. But that hasn't stopped linguists and amateur sleuths from obsessively dissecting every curve and dot, convinced there's a code waiting to be cracked. What makes the Codex Seraphinianus so compelling isn't just its strangeness, it's how perfectly it mirrors the enigma of medieval manuscripts. Like the Voynich, it taunts with the illusion of meaning. Like the Ripley scrolls, it blends art and esoteric knowledge into a single mesmerizing object. Serafini even aged the paper artificially, staining edges and mimicking the wear of centuries, as if to blur the line between artifact and hoax. But unlike historical codices, whose mysteries were likely accidental or practical, a lost language, a secret doctrine, the Codex Seraphinianus is a modern work about mystery itself. It's a love letter to the human urge to seek patterns, to believe that behind every riddle lies an answer. The cult following it spawned is proof of that enduring obsession. Academics analyze its structure, musicians compose scores based on its symbols, and conspiracy theorists insist it's anything from an alien lexicon to a prophecy. Yet Serafini's greatest trick might be reminding us how little has changed. Medieval scribes and modern artists alike are drawn to the unknown, to creating objects that defy time and reason. Whether penned in candlelight or crafted in a studio, these codices speak to the same timeless truth. Some secrets aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to make us wonder. Buried in the archives of the British Library for centuries, the Book of Soiga resurfaced in the 1990s like a ghost from the Renaissance, a cryptic manuscript that once consumed the brilliant, tormented mind of John Dee. This 16th-century magician, astrologer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I wasn't just intrigued by the book, he was obsessed. Pages upon pages of dense Latin text gave way to something far stranger. 36 tables filled with grids of seemingly nonsensical letters, arranged in patterns that defied logic. To Dee, these weren't random scribbles. They were a cipher, a hidden key to ultimate knowledge, perhaps even the language of angels themselves. The book's very title whispers of mystery. Soiga, an enigmatic word with no clear origin. Reverse it and you get ogios, Greek for holy, coincidence, or a clue. Dee spent years poring over its pages, convinced the tables held power if only he could crack their code. Legend claims he even sought divine intervention, performing elaborate rituals to summon the archangel Uriel for answers. According to his journals, Uriel told him the book's secrets were reserved for the eyes of the Messiah alone, a crushing blow to Dee, who died without ever unlocking its meaning. Centuries later, modern scholars faced the same puzzle. the rediscovered manuscripts tables appeared chaotic, letters shifting without pattern. But in 2006, computer scientist Jim Reeds made a breakthrough. Applying statistical analysis, he noticed the tables weren't random at all. Each grid followed a precise mathematical rule, a recursive algorithm where each line determined the next. Think of it like a medieval Sudoku, but instead of numbers, letters cascaded in a carefully structured dance. Suddenly, the Book of Soiga transformed from mystical gibberish to a meticulously crafted work of Renaissance cryptography. Yet the bigger question remains, why? Some argue it was a memory aid for complex magical incantations, the letters acting as mnemonic triggers. Others see it as a philosophical exercise, a reflection of the era's belief that language itself held cosmic power. Dee certainly thought so. He spent his life chasing the Enochian language, a celestial tongue he believed could command angels. The Book of Soiga might have been his holy grail, a tangible link between human intellect and divine wisdom. What makes this codex so haunting isn't just its unsolved riddle. It's the glimpse it offers into a world where magic and mathematics were inseparable, where the right combination of letters could theoretically unlock the universe. Today, the book sits quietly in the British Library, its grid still whispering to those who dare to look closely. Maybe Dee was right all along. Maybe some truths aren't meant to be decoded by mortal minds. Or maybe, just maybe, the next breakthrough is a single insight away. Picture a book that shouldn't exist, a fragile bridge between two worlds on the brink of collision. The Codex Mendoza is exactly that, a vibrant, painstakingly illustrated manuscript born from the ashes of the Aztec Empire, yet commissioned by the very men who destroyed it. Created in 1541, just 2 decades after Hernán Cortés toppled Tenochtitlan, this codex was meant to be a gift for Emperor Charles V, a crash course in the civilization Spain had just conquered. But what makes the Mendoza so extraordinary isn't just its origin. It's the uneasy collaboration that brought it to life. Indigenous scribes trained in the old ways of pictographic writing worked under Spanish direction, blending their sacred visual language with stark Latin annotations. The result, a document that's equal parts tribute and obituary, a record of Aztec glory filtered through the lens of colonial control. Flip through its pages and you'll find 3 distinct sections, each revealing a different layer of this cultural collision. The first is a history tracing the Aztec rise to power through stark, symbolic imagery. Warriors clad in jaguar skins conquer city-states, their victories marked by temples engulfed in flame. Next comes a tax ledger cataloging the vast tributes flowing into Tenochtitlan. Bundles of Quetzal feathers, jade beads, even live eagles for the emperor's zoo. Finally, there's a glimpse of daily life, children being schooled, merchants trading cocoa beans, punishments for drunkenness. To the Spanish, this was practical intelligence, a handbook for governing their new subjects. But to the Aztec artists, it may have been something far subtler, a silent act of preservation, smuggling their world's memory into the conqueror's archive. The Mendoza's genius lies in its contradictions. Spanish captions reduce complex glyphs to simplistic explanations, flattening a rich tradition into something digestible for foreign eyes. A glyph showing a warrior capturing enemies becomes merely, this signifies battles. Yet the illustrations themselves pulse with hidden depth. Look closely at the tribute section and you'll spot anomalies, a feather headdress drawn with impossible precision, or a jar of honey rendered in such detail it seems to gleam. Were these artists embedding covert messages? Scholars debate whether these flourishes were acts of defiance or simply muscle memory, the hands of scribes refusing to abandon centuries of craftsmanship. Then there are the gaps, moments where the Codex raises more questions than answers. One page depicts the founding of Tenochtitlan with an eagle perched on a cactus, a scene now emblazoned on Mexico's flag. But why include a small, bleeding figure beneath it? Modern historians suspect it references the sacrifice said to have consecrated the city, a ritual the Spanish would have condemned. Did the scribes risk leaving it in as a quiet rebuke, or was it simply too integral to omit? The Mendoza thrives in these ambiguities, a palimpsest of competing agendas. Today, the Codex survives as both a treasure and a paradox. Housed in Oxford's Bodleian Library, it's been studied, digitized, and admired, yet key passages resist full interpretation. Some glyphs remain untranslated, their meanings lost when the last elders who could read them perished in conquest. Others carried double entendres, their true significance debated by linguists. What's undeniable is the Mendoza's power as a testament to resilience. It's a record of a civilization dismantled, yes, but also proof that culture cannot be erased with the stroke of a pen. Every vibrant page whispers the same truth: memory outlives empires. If ever there was a manuscript that embodied the term ahead of its time, it's the Codex Atlanticus, a staggering 12-volume collection of Leonardo da Vinci's notes, sketches, and musings, bound together in a tome that feels less like a book and more like a portal into one of history's most restless minds. Unlike the cryptic codices we've explored so far, Leonardo's work isn't encoded in an unknown language. The challenge lies in deciphering the sheer breadth of his genius, scrawled in his infamous mirror writing backward script that curls across the page like a secret meant only for the mirror's gaze. But this wasn't just an eccentric habit. Some scholars believe Leonardo, a left-hander, wrote this way to avoid smudging ink, while others think it was a deliberate shield against prying eyes, protecting ideas that might have seemed heretical or dangerous in Renaissance Italy. Open any page of the Codex Atlanticus and you're hit with a whirlwind of invention. Flying machines with helical rotors predating modern helicopters by centuries. Detailed studies of human anatomy, muscles and sinews rendered with an accuracy that would take medical textbooks generations to match. Even whimsical doodles of water swirling around rocks reveal his obsessive study of fluid dynamics. What's astonishing isn't just the diversity of subjects, it's the connections he drew between them. A sketch of a bird's wing might sit beside a note about leverage in architecture, as if Leonardo saw the universe as one vast, interlocking mechanism. Yet for all its brilliance, the Codex is also a fragmented puzzle. Pages are littered with abrupt shifts, a half-finished calculus equation next to a grocery list, a study of light refraction interrupted by a caricature. This wasn't disorganization, it was the mark of a mind too quick for linear thinking. Modern researchers using multispectral imaging have uncovered hidden layers beneath the ink preliminary sketches, erased ideas, even traces of earlier drafts. One startling discovery, a previously unnoticed design for a robotic knight, a humanoid automaton with gears and pulleys that could sit up, wave its arms, and even open its jaw. Was this a fanciful toy, or did Leonardo envision mechanics we'd only associate with science fiction? The Codex Atlanticus also holds quieter, more intimate secrets. Marginal notes reveal Leonardo's frustrations. Tell me if anything was ever done. He scribbles beside a design, a rare glimpse of self-doubt. Elsewhere, he jots down a fable about a moth drawn fatally to flame, perhaps reflecting on his own relentless curiosity. These human touches remind us that behind the legend was a man who spilled ink, second-guessed himself, and occasionally left coffee rings on his work. Today, the Codex is both a treasure and a battleground. Conservationists painstakingly restore fragile pages, while historians debate interpretations. Was his aerial screw truly a helicopter prototype or just a thought experiment? Did his anatomical drawings come from clandestine dissections forbidden by the Church? Every generation brings new tools and new questions. Recently, artificial intelligence was trained to spot patterns in his mirror writing, uncovering subtle shifts in his creative process. But perhaps the most enduring mystery is this: how much of Leonardo's work was lost to time? The Codex Atlanticus is just the largest surviving fragment of a mind that never stopped wandering, sketching, and questioning. In the end, the Codex resists categorization. It's not just art, science, or engineering, it's a testament to what happens when those boundaries dissolve. Flipping through its pages feels like peering over Leonardo's shoulder as he races to capture lightning in a bottle, one backward sentence at a time. And that's the magic of it. Even now, 500 years later, we're still catching up. While the Codex Atlanticus captures Leonardo da Vinci's sprawling genius, the Codex Arundel offers something equally precious, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the chaos of his mind. Smaller but no less dense, this notebook is a storm of ideas, where precise geometric diagrams collide with hurried sketches of water wheels, architectural arches, and cryptic notes scribbled in his trademark mirror script. Unlike polished treatises, the Arundel feels alive, its pages stained with ink smudges and finger marks, as if Leonardo raced to capture thoughts faster than his hand could follow. Here, brilliance isn't curated, it's caught mid-flight. What makes this codex so fascinating is its sheer unpredictability. One page might detail a method for measuring the weight of air, a concept centuries ahead of its time, while the next devolves into frantic calculations for a never-built bridge or a jagged sketch of a soldier's helmet. There's no hierarchy to his curiosity. The mundane and the monumental share the same space. A list of household expenses might sit beside a breakthrough in optics, proving that even the greatest minds juggled the everyday alongside the extraordinary. This disorder isn't carelessness, it's a testament to how Leonardo thought. His ideas weren't linear but synaptic, firing in all directions at once. Reconstructing his unfinished projects from these fragments is like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Take his designs for perpetual motion machines. The Arundel contains multiple variations, each tweaking gear ratios or weights in pursuit of an impossible dream. Modern engineers have tried building them, only to confirm what Leonardo likely suspected: they don't work. Yet buried in these failures are flashes of insight. His understanding of friction and torque was astonishingly advanced, and some designs inadvertently foreshadowed mechanisms used in modern clockwork. The Arundel shows us a mind unafraid to chase dead ends, because even wrong turns could lead to unexpected truths. Then there are the quieter revelations, the human moments hiding between equations. A sketch of a child's face, tenderly drawn, interrupts a page on hydraulic engineering. A note scrawled in frustration reads, "Why does the flame rise upward?" A simple question that reveals his relentless need to interrogate the world. These glimpses remind us that genius isn't just about answers, it's about the audacity to keep asking. Today, the Codex Arundel sits in the British Library, digitized for anyone to explore. But its true legacy lies in its messiness. Where other manuscripts present knowledge as something fixed, this one celebrates the chaos of discovery. Leonardo didn't just leave behind blueprints, he left a blueprint for thinking itself, a reminder that the best ideas often begin as scribbles in the margins. The Codex Leicester isn't just another Leonardo da Vinci notebook, it's a time capsule of scientific prophecy. A work so forward-thinking that its owner, Bill Gates, once paid over $30 million to possess it. Unlike the Codex Atlanticus or Arundel, which sprawl across countless subjects, this manuscript zeroes in with laser precision on two obsessions: water and the cosmos. Here, Leonardo's pen becomes a scalpel, dissecting the behavior of rivers, the physics of eddies, and even the moon's glow with a clarity that borders on clairvoyance. Flip through its 72 pages, and you'll find no whimsical doodles or shopping lists, just relentless inquiry. Each observation building toward revelations that would take mainstream science centuries to catch up to. Take his studies of hydrodynamics. While 16th-century scholars still clung to Aristotle's idea that water moved in perfect circles, Leonardo sketched the truth: turbulent spirals, cross-currents, and whirlpools, all rendered with an accuracy that modern fluid dynamicists confirm in labs. One particularly stunning page diagrams how water behaves when obstructed by a bridge piling, capturing the exact moment flow fractures into chaotic vortices. Today, engineers use computational models to predict these patterns. Leonardo did it with a quill and intuition. Then there's his theory on why seashell fossils appear on mountaintops. Long before plate tectonics was a glimmer in science's eye, he proposed that Earth's crust must have shifted, lifting ancient seabeds skyward. It was heresy in his era, but he didn't care. The Codex Leicester shows a mind unshackled from dogma, willing to chase evidence wherever it led, but perhaps its most haunting passages concern the moon. Leonardo rejected the popular belief that moonlight was emitted by the lunar surface itself. Instead, he hypothesized correctly that it was reflected sunlight, and even calculated how Earth's oceans might mirror light in the same way. His drawings of lunar craters, sketched without a telescope, eerily match what Apollo missions would photograph centuries later. How he deduced their existence by observing how sunlight struck spheres of wet clay, simulating celestial shadows in his workshop. This blend of hands-on experimentation and visionary leaps makes the Codex feel less like a relic and more like a dispatch from the future. Preserving such a fragile artifact requires cutting-edge tech. The manuscript's pages, originally loose sheets, are now housed in a climate-controlled case that filters out UV light and regulates humidity. Digital scanners with multispectral imaging have uncovered faded notes and hidden sketches invisible to the naked eye, while 3D modeling allows researchers to virtually turn pages without risking damage. Gates, recognizing its cultural value, has loaned it to museums worldwide, but only under strict conditions, including light levels lower than a moonlit night. What makes the Codex Leicester timeless isn't just its scientific foresight. It's the way Leonardo's questions still resonate. When he pondered why rivers meander or how clouds form, he was probing mysteries we're still unraveling today. His notes are littered with margin scribbles like "test this again" or "ask Benedetto about the current," revealing a mind in perpetual beta, always refining. In an age of instant answers, the Codex reminds us that some truths only yield to patient, obsessive curiosity. 500 years later, its pages still hum with the electricity of a man who saw the universe not as a puzzle to solve, but as a conversation to join. Hidden for centuries in the shadows of St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai, the Codex Sinaiticus wasn't so much discovered as it was rescued page by fragile page from the brink of oblivion. This isn't just another ancient Bible, it's one of the two oldest surviving complete Christian scriptures, penned in Greek by 3 meticulous scribes around the year 350. Imagine the weight of that moment, the Roman Empire still looming, Constantine's Edict of Milan freshly legalizing Christianity, and here, in a remote desert outpost, a team of copyists worked under flickering lamplight to preserve the sacred texts that would shape Western civilization. Their creation, the Sinaiticus, is a marvel of survival, a parchment time machine carrying the earliest known complete New Testament, along with swaths of the Old Testament and 2 controversial early Christian writings since excluded from modern Bibles. The drama of its modern recovery reads like an archaeological thriller. In 1844, a young German scholar named Konstantin von Tischendorf arrived at St. Catherine's, drawn by rumors of ancient manuscripts moldering in the library. What he found stunned him: a basket of parchment leaves destined to be burned as kindling, containing verses from the Greek Old Testament. The monks, unaware of their treasure, let him take 43 pages. But Tischendorf knew this was just the beginning. He returned 15 years later, this time with the backing of the Russian Tsar, and after months of negotiation, left with nearly the entire Codex, over 340 leaves shipped to St. Petersburg under circumstances still hotly debated. Was it a gift, a loan, or, as some monks later claimed, an act of cultural theft? The truth may never be settled, but one thing's certain: without Tischendorf's obsession, the Sinaiticus might have vanished into smoke. Yet the Codex's fragmentation tells its own fraught story. Today, its pages are scattered like ancient shards across 4 nations, the bulk in the British Library, chunks in Leipzig, fragments in St. Petersburg, and a handful finally returned to St. Catherine's in 2003 after a global outcry. Each piece bears the scars of history, margins scorched by candles, ink faded from centuries of reverent touch, even patches where medieval monks scrubbed away the original text to reuse the parchment, a common practice now tragically called palimpsesting. Modern technology has revealed ghostly traces of those erased words, including passages from a long-lost Greek translation of the Old Testament, even older than the Sinaiticus itself. But why does this manuscript spark such fervor? Because it freezes a pivotal moment in religious history. The Sinaiticus captures Christianity before canonization hardened into dogma. Its New Testament includes the Epistle of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas works later deemed apocryphal, while omitting verses like the resurrection ending of Mark's Gospel, now a cornerstone of Easter liturgy. Scholars pore over these differences, debating whether they reflect regional variations or early theological disputes. Even the scribes' corrections, visible under ultraviolet light, offer clues. Was that comma added to clarify doctrine, or was it just a tired monk's slip of the pen? Perhaps the greatest paradox of the Codex Sinaiticus is how it unites and divides. A treasure to academics, a relic to the faithful, and a bone of contention between nations, it's a living testament to how texts like faith are never truly fixed. They breathe, evolve, and occasionally, against all odds, survive. While the Codex Sinaiticus offers a glimpse into early Christianity's formative years, its younger sibling, the Codex Alexandrinus, paints an even richer portrait of how Scripture evolved across time and geography. Crafted in the 5th century, this monumental Bible is a paradox, both more complete and more enigmatic than its famous predecessor. Where the Sinaiticus survives in fragments, the Alexandrinus arrives nearly intact, its 1,000-plus parchment pages preserving not just the canonical New and Old Testaments, but also rare extras like the first and second epistles of Clement, texts revered by early Christians but later excluded from the Bible. Yet for all its wholeness, this codex is anything but straightforward. Every margin, every correction, every subtle shift in handwriting whispers secrets about the turbulent world that produced it. The differences between these 2 giants of Christian literature are stark. Open the Sinaiticus and you'll find a text still in flux, with scribbles where scribes debated wording or doctrinally charged passages like the story of the adulterous woman absent entirely. The Alexandrinus, by contrast, reflects a stabilizing tradition. Its New Testament aligns closely with modern Bibles, suggesting how quickly certain texts gained authority. But look closer and the cracks in that uniformity appear. The Old Testament portion, for instance, follows the Greek Septuagint translation but with curious variations. The Book of Psalms includes an extra psalm attributed to David after his Bathsheba scandal, a verse absent from Hebrew scriptures but cherished by early Greek-speaking Christians. Such deviations aren't mistakes, they're evidence of a faith still deciding what Scripture meant. Then there's the mystery of its origins. Unlike the Sinaiticus, born in a desert monastery, the Alexandrinus likely came from the intellectual furnace of Alexandria, Egypt's cosmopolitan heart, where Jewish, Christian, and pagan scholars clashed and exchanged ideas. You can almost taste that hybrid heritage in its pages. The elegant, uniform script reflects classical Greek calligraphy traditions, while the occasional Coptic letter shapes sneaking into the margins hint at the scribe's cultural roots. Even its name betrays a journey. Alexandrinus wasn't its original title but a label slapped on by 17th-century scholars who received it from Cyril Lucar, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who'd spirited it out of Egypt amid Ottoman turmoil. That journey from Alexandria to Constantinople to England reads like a geopolitical thriller. By the 1620s, the Codex was a bargaining chip in Cyril's desperate bid to align the Eastern Orthodox Church with Protestant England. He gifted it to King James I, yes, the Bible translation king, but the monarch died before accepting it. The task fell to his successor, Charles I, who handed it to the Royal Library, precursor to the British Museum. There it became a weapon in a different battle, the textual criticism wars. Scholars like Brian Walton used its readings to challenge the Catholic Church's Latin Vulgate, proving early Bibles weren't as standardized as Rome claimed. Today, the Codex Alexandrinus sits under climate-controlled glass in the British Library, its pages digitized for the world to study. But its true legacy isn't just in what it preserves, it's in what it questions. Every variance from later Bibles, every marginal note, even the faintest scrape of a corrected letter, forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Scripture wasn't handed down from heaven fully formed. It was lived, argued over, and sometimes altered by human hands in candlelit scriptoriums. That might unsettle some believers, but it also makes the Alexandrinus something extraordinary, a living conversation frozen in ink, one that invites us to join across 16 centuries. Imagine a manuscript so bold it rewrites the story of Jesus' life right before your eyes. The Codex Bezae, a 5th century treasure named after its 16th century owner Theodore Beza, doesn't just contain the New Testament, it dances on the edge of heresy. Unlike the orderly Alexandrinus or the fragmented Sinaiticus, this codex gleefully breaks the rules. Written in Greek on the left page and Latin on the right, it wasn't merely a translation tool. It was a battleground of versions where familiar gospel stories twist into startling new shapes. Take the Gospel of Luke's account of Jesus' crucifixion. In most Bibles, Jesus pleads, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." But the Bezae silence, that iconic line, vanishes entirely. Meanwhile, in John's Gospel, the Bezae inserts a bizarre daytime trial before Caiaphas, a scene absent from every other ancient manuscript. Were these scribble mistakes or deliberate edits preserving forgotten strands of early Christianity? The Codex's eccentricities don't stop there. It treats female disciples with unusual prominence. When Jesus heals a man with a withered hand, the Bezae alone mentions the crowd included many women, a detail that aligns with archaeological evidence of women's active roles in early Christian communities but clashes with later patriarchal revisions. Even the Lord's Prayer gets a makeover, adding, "Let your Holy Spirit come upon us and cleanse us," a line that smells suspiciously of early charismatic worship. For scholars, these quirks are either gold mines or landmines. Traditionalists dismiss them as rogue scribble inventions, while revisionists see echoes of suppressed traditions. Perhaps even communities that envisioned a more radical, egalitarian Christianity before orthodoxy hardened. Then there's the mystery of its journey. The Codex surfaced in Lyon in 1562, smuggled out of the monastery of St. Irenaeus during the Wars of Religion. Its Greek-Latin format suggests it was crafted for a bilingual community, likely in Antioch or Constantinople, where theological debates raged hottest. But how did it dodge the standardization that smoothed out other texts? Some argue it was a living text, updated by generations of scribes who felt entitled to improve scripture. Others whisper it was hidden by dissenters, a time capsule of beliefs too dangerous to voice aloud. Modern technology has only deepened the intrigue. Multispectral imaging revealed erased notes in the margins annotations that might have explained the odd changes. Were they scrubbed to avoid accusations of heresy? The Bezae refuses to confess. Today, it sits in Cambridge's library, a reminder that the Bible wasn't always a monolith. Sometimes it was a conversation, one where women spoke louder, forgiveness wasn't guaranteed, and the Holy Spirit barged into the Lord's Prayer uninvited. And that's what makes it priceless, not despite its contradictions, but because of them. The Codex Amiatinus isn't just a Bible, it's a monumental act of devotion, inked onto over 1,000 pages of calfskin by monks whose names history nearly erased. Crafted in the early 8th century at the twin monasteries of Monkwearmouth and Jarrow in Anglo-Saxon England, this colossal manuscript holds the distinction of being the oldest complete Latin Bible in existence. But what makes it truly extraordinary isn't just its age or its heft weighing as much as a small child. It's the sheer audacity of its creation. In an era when most of Europe was fragmented by war and cultural collapse, a group of Northumbrian monks embarked on a project so ambitious it would have made even Charlemagne's scholars pause, replicating the grand Italian Bibles of the 6th century down to the last illuminated letter. The story begins with Ceolfrith, abbot of Monkwearmouth Jarrow, who commissioned not one but 3 giant Bibles, 2 for the monastery's altars and 1 as a gift for the Pope himself. The labor was staggering. Scribes worked in shifts, their hands cramping as they copied Jerome's Latin Vulgate onto sheets of vellum prepared from the hides of an estimated 500 calves. The ink, mixed from oak galls and iron salts, had to be painstakingly reapplied as it faded. And the decorations, oh, the decorations. The Codex Amiatinus opens with a full-page illustration of Ezra, the biblical scribe, hunched over his work in a robe that echoes the monastic habits of its real-life creators. It's a self-portrait in disguise, a quiet nod to the men who saw themselves as inheritors of Ezra's sacred task. But here's where the tale takes a twist. Of the 3 Bibles, only the Amiatinus survives, and its journey to the modern day reads like a miracle. In 716, Ceolfrith set out for Rome, the massive Codex in his possession as an offering to Pope Gregory II. He never made it. The old abbot died en route, and the Bible vanished for centuries, only to resurface in a Tuscan monastery atop Mount Amiota, hence its name. How it got there is anyone's guess. Did loyal monks complete Ceolfrith's pilgrimage? Was it traded, stolen, or secreted away during Viking raids? The Codex keeps its secrets close. What we do know is that its survival defies all odds. The other 2 Bibles, lost to time, likely destroyed in the 9th century Danish invasions that gutted Northumbria's monasteries. The Amiatinus, by sheer luck or providence, escaped the flames. Even its authenticity was doubted for years. Many assumed it was an Italian original, too perfect to be the work of barbarian Anglo-Saxons. It wasn't until the 19th century that scholars spotted clues in the script and marginalia, finally giving credit to those forgotten Northumbrian scribes. Today, the Codex resides in Florence's Laurentian Library, its pages still radiant with the labor of men who believed their work would outlast empires. And they were right. Open to any page, and you'll find traces of their world, a smudged fingerprint in the margin, a faint correction where a monk second-guessed his Latin, even the occasional doodle of a bird pecking at the text. These aren't flaws, they're whispers across 13 centuries, proof that devotion isn't measured in perfection, but in persistence. The Amiatinus stands as a testament to what happens when faith meets craftsmanship, and to the stubborn truth that some books refuse to be forgotten. Shimmering under museum lights like a relic from another world, the Codex Argentius, the Silver Bible, isn't just a manuscript, it's a statement. Crafted in the early 6th century for Ostrogothic King Theodoric the Great, this dazzling gospel book was designed to stun. Imagine unrolling its purple-dyed vellum pages, each line of text painstakingly inked in silver, key passages gleaming in gold, as if the very words of Scripture had been woven from celestial light. This wasn't just a religious text, it was a political masterpiece, a bold declaration that the Goths, often dismissed as barbarians by Rome, could produce a Bible more magnificent than anything in the imperial archives. The story begins with Bishop Wulfila, a man caught between 2 worlds. Born to Gothic parents in Roman territory, he devoted his life to translating the Bible into Gothic, creating a written language for his people by grafting Greek letters onto Germanic roots. The Codex Argentius is the crowning jewel of that effort, one of the few surviving copies of Wulfila's translation, and the only one that feels like a royal commission. Scholars believe it was created in Ravenna, Theodoric's capital, where artisans blended Roman luxury with Gothic pride. The choice of materials was deliberate: purple parchment, a color reserved for emperors, paired with ink made from powdered silver mixed with vinegar, a technique borrowed from imperial decrees. Every flourish whispered the same message: Goths weren't just conquerors, they were cultured, they belonged. Yet the Codex's survival is as improbable as its craftsmanship. After Theodoric's kingdom crumbled, the book vanished for nearly 1,000 years, only to resurface in the 16th century at a Belgian monastery, missing over half its original leaves, its silver ink tarnished black with age. How it got there is a riddle wrapped in war and wanderlust. Some think it was looted during the Gothic Wars, carried north by fleeing nobles. Others suggest it was hidden by monks during the chaos of the Lombard invasions. Whatever its path, the manuscript's next chapter was even more unlikely. A Swedish chancellor, Magnus Gabriel de la Gardie, acquired it in the 17th century as a trophy for the rising Swedish Empire, framing the Gothic text as an ancestral relic linking modern Scandinavia to the ancient Goths. Today, the Codex Argenteus sits in Uppsala University Library, its remaining 187 pages carefully preserved under UV filtering glass. Modern technology has revealed secrets even its scribes couldn't have imagined. Multispectral imaging shows erased undertext notes in Gothic that may be older than Wulfila's translation. Some pages bear faint fingerprints, perhaps from the scribe who wiped away excess silver dust. And then there's the lingering mystery of the missing leaves. Fragments occasionally surface. One turned up in a German cathedral library in 1970, used as a bookmark in a medieval ledger. What makes this manuscript so mesmerizing isn't just its beauty or rarity. It's the way it defies simple categorization. A religious text, yes, but also a cultural manifesto. A work of art, undoubtedly, yet also a linguistic Rosetta Stone, the primary source for reconstructing the extinct Gothic language. When scholars study its carefully lettered words, they're not just reading scripture. They're hearing the echo of a people who refused to be forgotten, who stitched their identity into the very ink of history. The Codex Argenteus endures as a paradox, a book meant to glorify a kingdom that no longer exists, written in a language no one speaks, yet still shining, quite literally, centuries after its makers dreamed it into being. The Codex Calixtinus isn't just a medieval manuscript, it's a backpacker's guide to the divine. Created in the 12th century as the ultimate travel companion for pilgrims trekking to Santiago de Compostela, this book blends practical survival tips with celestial fireworks, all wrapped in a parchment cover. Need to know where to find fresh water on the Camino? Check. Want to read about a saint resurrecting a roasted chicken? That's in there too. But what makes the Calixtinus truly extraordinary isn't just its eclectic content, it's the drama surrounding its survival. Because this 800-year-old guide was once stolen in a heist so brazen, it could have been lifted straight from a caper film. Picture the scene, July 2011, the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, where the Codex had rested for centuries under lock and key. Somehow, a former electrician with a grudge waltzed past security, snatched the manuscript from its vault, and vanished without a trace. For nearly a year, investigators chased dead ends until a breakthrough led them to a garage in a nearby town where they found the Codex wrapped in a plastic bag tucked between old newspapers. The thief, it turned out, wasn't some art world sophisticate. He was a disgruntled employee who'd pocketed the book as twisted revenge for unpaid wages. The irony, in stealing the most famous guide to the Camino, he'd taken the one object guaranteed to make the entire Catholic world come looking. But why was this book so coveted? Because it's a kaleidoscope of medieval life, part travelogue, part miracle anthology, and part propaganda piece. It was likely commissioned to boost pilgrimage traffic to Santiago. The text claims falsely to be penned by Pope Calixtus II, a marketing ploy to lend it authority. Inside, pilgrims found everything from warnings about poisonous rivers to raucous tales of local swindling travelers. One section details the legend of Charlemagne dreaming of the Milky Way, reimagined as a celestial path leading to Compostela, planted there by Saint James himself. The message was clear: this journey wasn't just a hike, it was a holy mission. Then there's the music. Tucked into the Codex are the earliest known polyphonic compositions from Europe, harmonies meant to be sung in the cathedral by weary pilgrims. These aren't simple chants, they're intricate, woven melodies that still echo in churches today. Scholars argue these pages prove the Camino wasn't just a spiritual highway, it was a cultural pipeline, funneling musical innovation across continents. Today, the recovered Codex sits back in Santiago, now guarded like crown jewels. Yet its legacy lives on every time a modern pilgrim laces up their boots. Because 8 centuries later, its advice still holds: watch out for shady innkeepers, drink from safe wells, and keep walking. Because miracles, like good stories, are just around the bend. Beneath the vibrant colors and intricate glyphs of the Codex Borgia lies a cosmic battleground where gods trade blood for sunlight and priests decipher fate in the flutter of a bird's wing. This pre-Columbian masterpiece, one of the few Mesoamerican codices to survive Spain's zealous destruction of indigenous knowledge, isn't just a book. It's a portal into the Aztec mind, where time wasn't measured in days but in sacred cycles, and every sunrise demanded sacrifice. Painted on deerskin around the 15th century, likely by Tlaxcalan scribes, bitter rivals of the Aztecs, yet sharers of their cosmology, the Codex unfolds like a divine playbook. Flip through its 76 pages and you'll find a kaleidoscope of deities: Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent coiled around temples; Tezcatlipoca's smoking mirror revealing illusions; and Xipe-Totec, the flayed god, wearing a victim's skin like a grisly cloak. These aren't mere illustrations, they're visual equations, encoding the rituals needed to keep the universe in balance. What makes the Borgia exceptional is its unflinching glimpse into the Tonalpohualli, the 260-day sacred calendar that dictated everything from harvests to wars. Each page crackles with omens, a fusion of artistry and divination. Take the haunting section on the Trecina, 13-day periods ruled by specific gods. One page shows a priest holding a bleeding heart aloft as the sun god Tanatia looms above, demanding nourishment. Another depicts the night sky as a monstrous jaguar, stars dripping from its jaws, a sign of impending drought. Modern scholars have spent decades deciphering these symbols, realizing they're not random but mathematical. The patterns track planetary movements with startling accuracy, proving Aztec priests were astronomers rivaling Copernicus. Yet the Codex's survival is its own miracle. When Spanish friars like Diego de Landa burned thousands of indigenous texts as devilish lies, the Borgia slipped through the flames, possibly hidden in a Franciscan monastery as a curiosity for European scholars. By the 18th century, it resurfaced in the collection of Cardinal Stefano Borgia, whose name it now bears. But here's the twist: its very preservation came at a cost. Without living scribes to interpret its secrets, generations of Europeans dismissed it as primitive art. Only in the 20th century did researchers like Eduard Seller begin peeling back its layers, recognizing the Borgia as a sophisticated theological treatise. Today, housed in the Vatican Library, the Codex still guards mysteries. Why do certain pages show inverted worlds where gods walk upside down? Is the maze-like page of the demon a map of the underworld or a shaman's hallucination? Even the pigments defy time: the brilliant blues made from rare Maya azurite, the reds from cochineal insects harvested on cactus paddles. These choices weren't aesthetic, they were spiritual. To the scribes, color itself was sacred, a vibration connecting earth to the divine. The Borgia's true power lies in its duality. It's both a relic of a shattered world and a living challenge to Western notions of primitive versus advanced. While Europe was emerging from the Middle Ages, Mesoamerica had charted Venus's cycles to the hour and conceived time as a spinning wheel of destiny. The Codex doesn't just preserve that knowledge, it dares us to listen across 5 centuries to the whispers of a civilization that saw the universe not as clockwork, but as a living thing, hungry and holy. The Codex Maglioebkiano sits at the crossroads of salvation and erasure, a vibrant yet haunting record of Aztec spirituality, penned by indigenous scribes under the watchful eyes of Spanish missionaries. Created around 1540 in the tumultuous decades following conquest, this manuscript is both a masterpiece of cultural preservation and a relic of colonial violence. Its pages burst with rich illustrations of Aztec gods, rituals, and festivals, each image rendered in pigments derived from crushed insects, minerals, and plants. Yet these vivid depictions weren't meant to celebrate the culture they documented. They were tools for its destruction, commissioned by Franciscan friars who sought to identify and root out idolatry among converted communities. Here lies the Codex's painful paradox. It survives because it was meant to erase. Turn the pages and the tension is palpable. On one folio, the god Huitzilopochtli appears in full regalia, his hummingbird helmet, his shield studded with turquoise, drawn with such care that you can almost hear the chants of his priests. Flip further, and you'll find meticulous descriptions of the Veintina ceremonies, the 18 monthly festivals marking the Aztec solar year. The artists captured every detail: the swirling dances, the paper banners dyed in sacrificial blood, the sacred volador ritual where men spun from ropes to honor the sun. But beside these images, Spanish annotations crawl like shadows, labeling each practice as superstition or devil worship. The scribes, likely Nahua converts themselves, worked under impossible conditions, preserving their heritage even as they were forced to betray it. Scholars still grapple with how to interpret this layered document. Is it a covert act of resistance, with indigenous artists embedding hidden meanings? Some note how certain gods are drawn with deliberate grandeur, their postures defiant, while Spanish glosses seem hastily scrawled, almost dismissive. Or was it genuine collaboration, with scribes assimilating into the new order? The Codex's treatment of human sacrifice adds another wrinkle. While it graphically depicts heart extraction, the accompanying text exaggerates the brutality, echoing Spanish propaganda used to justify conquest. This raises unsettling questions. Did the artists amplify violence to satisfy their patrons, or were they subtly critiquing colonial hypocrisy? The ethical weight of studying the Maglioebkiano is immense. Modern researchers must navigate its dual identity as both a window into pre-Hispanic life and a product of cultural genocide. Museums that display it face criticism for showcasing something born of oppression, while indigenous communities in Mexico increasingly demand repatriation of such texts, arguing they're not artifacts but living ancestors. Yet for all its fraught history, the Codex refuses to be silenced. In 2018, digital scans revealed previously unnoticed glyphs hidden beneath Spanish text, suggesting some scribes may have secretly preserved original Nahuatl terms. These discoveries hint at a silent dialogue between past and present, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, resilience leaves traces. What lingers after closing the Maglioebkiano isn't just its beauty or its sorrow, it's the unresolved conversation it forces upon us. Can we honor the indigenous knowledge it preserves without legitimizing the systems that sought to destroy it? Perhaps the answer lies in listening beyond the colonial annotations, hearing the whispers of the scribes who painted their world with one hand while the other was bound. Among the ashes of conquest, the Codex Telleriano Remensis flickers like a candle in a storm, a fragile yet defiant record of Aztec memory, penned under the watchful eyes of Spanish friars. Created around 1560 in the turbulent decades after Cortés toppled Tenochtitlan, this manuscript is a paradox of collaboration and resistance. On its surface, it appears to be just another colonial document, Aztec history and calendar systems painstakingly recorded, but annotated in Spanish with Christian commentary condemning indigenous beliefs as idolatry. Yet between those lines, hidden in the delicate brushstrokes of Nahua scribes, lies a silent rebellion, a refusal to let their world be erased. Turn to the section depicting the reign of Moctezuma II, and you'll spot the genius of this covert resistance. The Spanish gloss dismisses an eclipse as mere superstition, but the indigenous illustration tells another story. The artist didn't just draw a darkened sun. They rendered it as Tonatiuh, the sun god, his face contorted in anguish with a spear piercing his celestial flesh. To a Nahua reader, this wasn't an astronomical event. It was an omen of the cataclysm about to befall their empire. Similarly, the page on the new fire ceremony, a ritual performed every 52 years to prevent cosmic collapse, carries a Spanish label mocking its futility. But the artist smuggled in sacred details. The drill used to light the fire mirrors the weapon of Zucotl, the fire serpent, a nod to the ceremony's true spiritual weight. These weren't mistakes, they were acts of cultural encryption. The calendar pages reveal even bolder subversion. At first glance, they seem to conform to Spanish demands. Christian feast days overwrite traditional Valentina festivals. But look closer. The glyph for the month Panquetzalistli, which once honored Huitzilopochtli, now features a subtle twist. The deity's iconic hummingbird headdress is tucked into the corner of the page, almost camouflaged beside a crucifix. And in the Tonalpohualli, the sacred 260-day divinatory calendar, the scribes left entire sections untranslated, preserving the original Nahuatl terms for days and spirits despite explicit orders to eradicate them. Modern scholars using infrared imaging have detected even more startling finds, faint underdrawings of sacrificial rituals that were painted over with benign scenes before the Spanish inspectors could see them. What makes the Telleriano Romensis extraordinary isn't just its hidden messages, it's the sheer audacity of its creation. The scribes worked under brutal conditions. Many were survivors of massacres, their cities razed, their temples demolished. Yet with every stroke of their brushes, they reclaimed agency. When depicting the Spanish arrival, they didn't draw towering conquistadors astride horses as European artists would. Instead, they showed Cortés and his men as small, almost insignificant figures beside the grandeur of Tenochtitlan's canals and pyramids. It's a perspective shift that speaks volumes. To the Nahuas, this was still their story, their homeland, no matter what the invaders claimed. Today, the Codex sits in Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale, a world away from the soil its creators walked. But its legacy is alive in modern Mexico, where indigenous scholars are using its pages to resurrect near-lost traditions. The Telleriano Romensis isn't just a relic, it's a bridge whispering across centuries that some truths can't be erased with ink or iron. They endure in the quiet defiance of artists who painted their history between the lines, knowing full well their oppressors would never truly read it. The Codex Auburn doesn't just recount history, it weeps it. Written in the decades after the fall of Tenochtitlan, this Nahuatl language manuscript is a raw, unflinching diary of survival, its pages stained with the grief and resilience of a people rewriting their story under the boot of conquest. Unlike the Telleriano Romensis or Magliebkiano, which were crafted under Spanish supervision, the Auburn feels intensely personal, a clandestine act of memory, its pictograms and annotations flowing like a whispered conversation between generations. Here, the Aztec scribes weren't just documenting events, they were stitching their identity back together, one glyph at a time. Open its pages and you'll find history stripped bare. The conquest isn't framed as a heroic Spanish adventure, but as a series of harrowing, intimate tragedies. One passage describes the massacre at the Templo Mayor with gut-wrenching simplicity, and the blood ran like water, like slime it spread across the plaza. The imagery is visceral corpses piled like broken pottery, survivors stumbling through smoke, children wailing for parents who'd vanished into the carnage. Yet amid the horror, the scribe inserts quiet acts of defiance. A tiny glyph of an eagle perches atop a ruined temple, a silent nod to Huitzilopochtli, the patron god whose altars had been smashed but whose spirit refused to die. What makes the Aubin so extraordinary is its hybrid nature. Spanish dates march alongside traditional Aztec year counts, creating a dual chronology where the past refuses to be fully colonized. Christian feast days appear in the margins, but they're overshadowed by vivid depictions of pre-Hispanic festivals. The fluttering banners of Ochpanistli, the fiery dance of Xochitl. Even the script itself is a battleground. The Nahuatl text flows in Roman letters, a concession to the new order, but the pictograms retain their ancient symbolism. A simple drawing of a shield isn't just a shield, it's a cipher for war, for resistance, for the untold stories of warriors who fought to the last. Yet interpreting these layers isn't straightforward. The Aubin's pictograms aren't a direct continuation of pre-contact Aztec writing. They're a fractured language adapting under duress. Some glyphs are crammed into European-style margins, their meanings compressed. Others borrow Spanish motifs. A cross might be drawn next to a traditional solar disk, not as surrender but as camouflage, hiding old gods in plain sight. Modern scholars debate whether these are acts of preservation or desperate improvisation. The answer likely is both. The Codex also guards glaring omissions. There's no glorification of Moctezuma, no romanticizing the Aztec Empire's golden age. Instead, it focuses on the gritty reality of daily life under colonial rule, the forced labor, the hunger, the epidemics that swept through Nahua communities like wildfire. One heartbreaking entry lists the names of children who died in a smallpox outbreak, their tiny lives reduced to a single line each. This isn't the grand narrative of empires, it's history from the ground up, told by those who sweated, starved, and buried their loved ones. Today, the Aubin sits in the British Museum, far from the land that birthed it, but its voice hasn't been silenced. Contemporary Nahua scholars pore over its pages, not as artifacts but as ancestral letters, decoding hints of survival strategies, which rituals went underground, which stories were told in secret. The Codex's greatest lesson might be this: conquest can burn libraries, but it can't erase memory. Ink fades, pigments crack, but the act of remembering, of defiantly writing, "We were here," echoes louder than any empire. The Codex Bourbonicus burns with colors so vivid they seem to defy the centuries' ochre, reds as deep as sacrificial blood, blues distilled from the heart of turquoise, and gold leaf that still glints like captured sunlight. Unlike many Mesoamerican manuscripts filtered through Spanish hands, this dazzling divinatory almanac may be one of the rare few created before Cortés ever set foot in Tenochtitlan. Painted on amatl paper made from fig tree bark, its pages unfold a cosmic roadmap of Aztec timekeeping, where every day pulsed with divine energy and human fate hung in the balance of celestial arithmetic. But for all its breathtaking artistry, the Bourbonicus is shrouded in controversy. Is this truly a pre-contact relic or a post-conquest masterpiece crafted by indigenous scribes clinging to their vanishing world? Turn to the opening pages and you're thrust into the Tonalpohualli, the sacred 260-day calendar governing rituals, marriages, and wars. Each day is represented by a glyph like a coiled serpent or a flint knife, paired with one of 13 celestial forces. Together, these symbols formed a complex matrix of omens. A day marked by the rabbit and the reed might promise abundance, while the jaguar combined with darkness warned of treachery. The precision is staggering. Modern scholars have matched these sequences to astronomical events like Venus cycles, proving Aztec priests weren't just mystics, they were mathematicians rivaling Europe's finest. Yet one anomaly fuels the authenticity debate. Unlike colonial-era codices, the Bourbonicus lacks Christian glosses or Spanish edits. Its purity feels almost too perfect. Some argue its flawless preservation suggests it was painted just after conquest, using traditional methods but hidden from missionary scrutiny. Then there's the Valentina section, where the 18 monthly festivals of the solar year explode across the pages in a riot of movement. Gods dance atop pyramids, their costumes detailed down to the last feather, while priests offer pulque and quail hearts to the heavens. The Feast of Toxcatl shows Tezcatlipoca, mirrored in obsidian, receiving a year's worth of devotion before his ritual impersonator is sacrificed, a ceremony Spanish chroniclers described with horror, but the Borbonicus depicts with solemn beauty. These illustrations are more than records, they're invitations to step into a living ceremony. The pigments themselves whisper secrets. Analysis reveals the red came from cochineal harvested on cactus paddles, the blue from Maya-style indigo traded across empires. Such materials would have been nearly impossible to source after Spanish disruption of indigenous trade networks, strengthening the case for a pre-conquest origin. But the Codex's journey through history adds another layer of mystery. It surfaced in the 18th century among the private collections of Spain's Bourbon monarchs, hence Borbonicus, but how it got there is anyone's guess. Was it looted during the sack of Tenochtitlan, smuggled out by a sympathetic friar? The manuscript bears silent scars, creases from being folded for concealment, faint stains that might be water damage from a desperate river crossing. Even its current home in Paris's Palais Bourbon feels ironic. A sacred text of the Americas now rests in a European palace, its original custodians long gone. What makes the Borbonicus unforgettable isn't just its age or artistry. It's the way it defies simple categorization. To some, it's a religious text, to others an astronomical thesis. Modern-day Nahua communities see it as a bridge to ancestral wisdom, while historians dissect its glyphs for clues about Aztec diplomacy and trade. But perhaps its greatest power lies in the questions it refuses to answer. Every time we think we've pinned down its origins, the Codex slips just beyond grasp, a shimmering enigma that, much like the gods it venerates, won't be easily confined. The Codex Fejevery Maya doesn't just depict gods, it traps them in a labyrinth of sacred geometry where every line and color hums with hidden meaning. One of the most visually arresting Mesoamerican manuscripts, this Mixtec ritual codex is a masterpiece of symbolic precision, painted on deerskin with pigments so vibrant they seem to pulse even after 5 centuries. Unlike the Borgia's chaotic divine battles or the Magliebkiano's colonial compromises, the Fejevery Maya is a study in cosmic order. Its pages unfold like a celestial clockwork, mapping the intertwined fates of gods, humans, and time itself. At first glance, it's a riot of intricate designs: serpents coiled around temples, deities bleeding into calendars, trees sprouting eyeballs and knives. But look deeper and you'll realize this isn't just art. It's a functioning diviner's manual, a how-to guide for navigating a universe where every moment was charged with destiny. Central to the Codex is the mesmerizing Tree of the East, a diagram so packed with symbology it feels like a Rosetta Stone for Mesoamerican spirituality. Radiating from its branches are the 4 cardinal directions, each governed by a god, a color, and a sacred bird. The east belongs to Zip-Totek, the flayed deity of renewal, his domain painted in life-giving red. To the north sits Mictlantecutli, the skeletal lord of the underworld, shrouded in black. Each direction isn't just a physical space but a temporal one, linking seasons, stages of life, even the hours of the day. Modern scholars call it a cosmogram, a snapshot of the universe's architecture, but to a Mixtec priest this was a living map. Consulting it, they could determine which days to plant crops, wage wars, or conduct sacrifices, all based on the shifting balance of divine energies. Yet the Fejevery Maya's true genius lies in its duality. While its structure is rigidly mathematical, aligning with Venus cycles and solar years, its imagery bursts with visceral humanity. One page shows Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, mid-transformation, his body half reptile, half human, as if caught between worlds. Another depicts a ritual bloodletting where priests pierce their tongues with obsidian blades, their crimson droplets nourishing the earth. These aren't static scenes, they're frozen moments of communion where the mortal and divine collide. Some researchers believe the Codex was used in picture reading, a form of divination where priests would meditate on specific images until visions emerged, much like tarot but rooted in a far older tradition. The Codex's survival is its own odyssey. After the Spanish conquest, it vanished into private collections, resurfacing in 19th century Hungary with no record of its journey. How did a Mixtec sacred text end up in Europe? Some speculate it was looted by a conquistador and sold as a curiosity. Others think Jesuit missionaries smuggled it out, intrigued by its pagan complexity. Either way, its isolation preserved it. Unlike manuscripts annotated by Spanish friars, the Shadowy remains untainted by colonial commentary, its symbols pure and unapologetic. Today, housed in Liverpool's World Museum, the Codex still guards its deepest secrets. Why do certain pages feature upside-down gods, as if reflecting an underworld mirror? What's the significance of the recurring knotted cords, which some argue represent sacred treaties between city-states? Even its name is a mystery. Shadowy honors two collectors, but the original Mixtec title is lost to time. Perhaps that's fitting. This isn't a book meant to be fully understood by outsiders. It's a key to a locked door, behind which lies a world where time was alive, gods walked among men, and ink itself was a form of prayer. The Codex Lord feels less like a book and more like a sacred fever dream, a kaleidoscope of gods, sacrifices, and celestial reckonings painted on deerskin so delicate it could crumble at a touch. This 16th century masterpiece is a cultural chimera, blending Mixtec and Zapotec traditions into a single, pulsating vision of the pre-Hispanic cosmos. Unlike the Borgia's orderly chaos or the Shadowy geometric precision, the Lord throbs with raw spiritual energy. Flip through its 24 surviving pages, and you're plunged into a world where deities don't just exist, they intervene, their blood mingling with the ink that traces their forms. Take the haunting depiction of the rain god Tlaloc, his goggle-eyed visage dripping with jade ornaments. He isn't just illustrated, he's activated, surrounded by swirling clouds and streams of liquid that might be rain, or might be the tears of children offered to him in drought. Nearby, the maize god Sentiotl emerges from a cracked earth, his body sprouting cornstalks like a living harvest. These aren't static portraits, they're ritual blueprints, snapshots of moments when the divine bled into the mortal realm. Scholars believe the Codex was used by priests to stage ceremonial reenactments, its pages serving as a script for performances where humans channeled gods through dance, costume, and even pain. But the Lord's true mystery lies in its hybrid soul. Some pages scream Mixtec influence gods framed by intricate step frets, their regalia echoing the styles of Oaxaca's highland kingdoms. Others whisper Zapotec, like the sprawling genealogy trees where rulers clutch ropes tying them to ancestors, a signature motif of Monte Albán's elite. This cultural fusion wasn't artistic coincidence. It was likely born from political marriage or conquest, a visual treaty between two civilizations forced to share a manuscript and a cosmology. The tension is palpable. In one section, the Mixtec wind god Ehecatl clashes with the Zapotec lightning deity Casillo, their iconographies jostling for dominance on the same page. Was this collaboration or coercion, a shared scripture or a captured one? Deciphering the Lord is like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces burned. It arrived in Europe as loot, eventually landing in the hands of Archbishop William Laud, a man who famously despised pagan texts yet inexplicably preserved this one. The first 20 pages are lost, and those that remain bear scars, stains from anxious fingers, folds where someone once tucked it into hiding, even a tear that slices through a depiction of the underworld as if fate itself mocked its themes. Modern technology has peeled back layers, revealing underdrawings where gods were sketched, erased, and redrawn, proof of theological debates frozen in pigment. Perhaps the most chilling revelation comes from the so-called Page of the Dead. Here, skeletal figures paddle through a black river, their canoes piled with offerings. At first glance, it mirrors classic Mesoamerican death journeys, but look closer. One figure wears a Spanish-style hat, another clutches a rosary. These aren't just imagined souls, they're real people recently deceased, their fates mapped onto an ancient cosmology by scribes grappling with colonial trauma. The Lord doesn't just record rituals, it captures a civilization in the act of adapting, bending but not breaking under the weight of a new world. Today, the Codex sits in Oxford's Bodleian Library, a world away from the sweat-soaked ceremonies it once guided. Yet its power lingers. Contemporary Mixtec and Zapotec artists study its pages to revive lost techniques, while historians mine its glyphs for clues about alliances erased by time. The Lord endures as both artifact and oracle, a reminder that some manuscripts don't just tell stories. They contain entire worlds waiting for the right eye to wake them. The Codex Vindobonensis unfurls like a royal tapestry woven from myth and memory, a sprawling Mixtec manuscript where gods dictate birthrights and kings trace their lineage back to the stars themselves. Painted on deerskin in the 14th century, this masterpiece isn't just a historical record. It's a sacred drama, blending genealogies of Oaxaca's ruling dynasties with cosmic creation myths in a visual symphony of red, black, and ochre. Unlike European chronicles obsessed with dates and battles, the Vindobonensis operates in a realm where time is fluid, and ancestry is measured not in years but in divine interventions. Here, a king's legitimacy might hinge on his grandmother's encounter with a feathered serpent, and a solar eclipse could be framed as the god's verdict on his reign. Every page pulses with narrative complexity. Take the foundational story of Lord Eightwind, a heroic figure born from a flint blade struck by celestial forces. His descendants, depicted as interconnected ribbons of marriages and conquests, sprawl across the manuscript like a sacred flowchart. The artistry is staggering. Rulers sit on jaguar thrones, their names encoded in glyphs resembling animals or natural elements. Lady Six Monkey, one of the few female rulers depicted, grips a spear in one hand and a spindle in the other, embodying the Mixtec ideal of balance between war and weaving. These aren't dry historical footnotes, they're declarations of power designed to awe rivals and honor ancestors. Yet the Codex's true brilliance lies in its dual function as both archive and prophecy. Scenes of royal births and alliances alternate with cosmological diagrams, the heavens depicted as a celestial river where deities paddle canoes of fire. One arresting section shows the first sunrise piercing the maw of a monstrous earth deity, echoing creation myths still told in Mixtec communities today. Modern scholars collaborating with indigenous historians have cross-referenced these narratives with archaeological sites like Tilantongo and Tututepec, matching manuscript glyphs to excavated palaces. In one revelatory breakthrough, a temple mural discovered in 2012 was found to depict the same War of the Heaven story told in the Vindobonensis, proving these weren't mere legends but living history. The Codex's survival is its own epic. After the Spanish invasion, it was smuggled out of Oaxaca, possibly by a Dominican friar fascinated by its artistry. By the 16th century, it surfaced in Vienna's Imperial Library, hence Vindobonensis, where Enlightenment scholars dismissed it as pagan curiosity. Only in the 1970s did researchers begin decoding its intricate language, realizing it held the keys to understanding a civilization that had been mislabeled as illiterate by conquerors. Today, digital restorations reveal hidden layers, faded annotations proving scribes updated the manuscript across generations, adding new victories or omitting disgraced relatives. What makes the Vindobonensis timeless isn't just its beauty or historical value. It's the way it challenges Western notions of what history should look like. This isn't a linear timeline but a living web where past and present coexist, and rulers derive authority not from crowns but from constellations. As Mixtec activists now use its pages to reclaim severed cultural links, the Codex reminds us that some stories refuse to stay buried, especially when they're written in the ink of gods. The Codex Zauch-Nuttall isn't just a manuscript, it's a pulse-pounding epic, a blood-soaked saga of ambition, betrayal, and divine favor painted across fragile deerskin. Unlike the orderly genealogies of the Vindobonensis, this Mixtec masterpiece reads like a medieval Game of Thrones, with its pages dominated by the rise and fall of 8-Deer Jaguar Claw, a warrior lord whose life blurs the line between history and myth. Drenched in crimson and gold, the Codex unfurls his story in vivid pictographs. Battles waged under omen-filled skies, marriages brokered like chess moves, and a fate so shocking it still sparks debate among scholars 8 centuries later. At first glance, the Zauch-Nuttall seems chaotic gods meddling in human affairs, cities erupting in flame, rulers morphing into animals, but every stroke is deliberate. Take the iconic scene where 8-Deer, bare-chested and clad in jaguar pelts, kneels before the mummified remains of his ancestors, their skeletal jaws agape as if whispering strategy. This isn't just a funeral rite, it's a power play. The accompanying glyphs reveal he's not mourning, he's claiming their legacy, positioning himself as the chosen heir to a dynasty stretching back to the dawn of time. The scribes even sneak in a visual prophecy. Above him, the sun god brandishes a spear, foreshadowing the wars to come. Decoding this narrative took decades of detective work. Unlike European chronicles, Mixtec histories don't spoon-feed dates or names. Key players are identified by glyphic nicknames: 8-Deer for his birth date, Jaguar Claw for his ferocity, while cities are symbolized by abstract icons. A smoking hill isn't just landscape, it's the conquered city of Hill of the Moon. A waterfall isn't scenery, it's the border of a rival kingdom. Scholars like Alfonso Cosso spent years cross-referencing these symbols with archaeological sites, matching pictorial battles to burned palaces unearthed in Oaxaca's valleys. Their breakthrough came when they realized the Zauch-Nuttall wasn't linear. It's a kaleidoscope jumping between timelines to highlight cosmic cause and effect. 8-Deer's victory at Red Hill isn't just a battle, it's karma for a slight against the rain god decades prior, the Codex's most electrifying twist. 8-Deer's downfall. After uniting vast territories through war and diplomacy, he's betrayed by his own kin, a coalition led by his nephew, Wind. The climactic scene shows 8-Deer bound to a scaffold, his chest split open in sacrifice, his blood watering the very soil he once ruled. But was this historical fact or poetic justice? Bone fragments from a royal tomb in Tututepec hint at a violent end, but some argue the scene is allegory, a warning against hubris. The truth may lie in between. Mixtec scribes saw no divide between the earthly and divine. To them, a king's fate was always written in both stardust and stone. What makes the Zauch-Nuttall unforgettable is its unflinching humanity. Between the grandeur, we glimpse intimate moments: 8-Deer weeping over a stillborn heir, his spies disguised as merchants, even a scandalous affair with a priestess that nearly toppled his reign. These aren't sterile records, they're flesh and blood drama. Surviving against all odds, hidden in a Florentine library for centuries, mislabeled as Aztec curios, the Codex now whispers its secrets to modern Mixtec activists reclaiming their stolen heritage. For them, it's not just a relic, it's proof that some stories refuse to die, even when written in the ink of the vanquished. Beneath the surface of an unassuming 16th century manuscript lies a secret, one that lay buried for centuries under a coat of plaster. The Codex Selden, tucked away in Oxford's Bodleian Library, seemed at first like just another colonial-era Mexican document. But in 1954, a conservator made a startling discovery. The parchment was a palimpsest, its original Mixtec text deliberately concealed beneath a layer of chalky paste. Someone, perhaps a terrified scribe under Spanish rule, had scraped away the sacred glyphs and painted over them with an entirely new manuscript, an act of cultural camouflage as desperate as it was ingenious. For decades, scholars could only guess at what lay beneath. Then, in 2015, cutting-edge hyperspectral imaging tore back the veil. Layer by layer, light wavelengths invisible to the human eye exposed the ghostly outlines of a lost Mixtec history, figures in feathered headdresses, cities marked by burning temples, and rulers holding court amid swirling celestial symbols. The hidden text wasn't just a random assortment of images. It was a cohesive narrative, likely a royal genealogy tracking the dynasties of Joltepec, a powerful Mixtec city-state. But unlike the triumphant chronicles of the Zauch-Nuttall or Vindobonensis, this codex carries whispers of rupture. One poignant scene shows a noblewoman, Lady Six Monkey, not in her usual role as a warrior queen, but kneeling before a masked figure, possibly recording a humiliating treaty or forced marriage in the wake of military defeat. What makes the Seldon's hidden layers so revelatory is their unfinished quality. Strokes trail off mid-glyph, whole sections remain rough outlines. Radiocarbon dating suggests the original was created around 1550, right as Spanish rule tightened its grip. This wasn't a polished heirloom, it was a work in progress, abruptly abandoned when the scribe's world collapsed. Some pages show frantic edits, dates altered, names scratched out, as if the artists were trying to rewrite history before the invaders arrived. Modern Mixtec scholars see these desperate revisions as evidence of something heartbreaking. Not just the erasure of a manuscript, but the unraveling of an entire way of recording time, identity, and power. Yet the Seldon story doesn't end there. Recent multispectral scans have revealed even deeper mysteries. Beneath the first erased layer, there may be traces of a third, older text, a kind of literary archaeology where every excavation raises new questions. Why did the scribes choose this particular deer hide to repurpose? Was it random, or did the original codex hold some sacred significance they couldn't bear to destroy? The answers might rewrite what we know about how indigenous communities navigated the trauma of conquest, not just through resistance, but through careful, covert preservation. Today, the Seldon stands as more than a recovered artifact. It's a testament to the resilience of memory, a reminder that histories suppressed don't always vanish sometimes, they just wait for the right light to shine through. And every time technology peels back another layer, we're granted a fleeting glimpse into a world that refused to be silenced. The Codex Bodley doesn't just record history, it weaponizes it. This sprawling Mixtec manuscript, painted on deerskin in the 14th century, is a masterclass in political propaganda, a lavish declaration that certain bloodlines were born to rule. Unlike the Zauch-Nuttall's cinematic violence or the Vindobonensis's celestial genealogies, the Bodley is laser-focused on one agenda, proving the divine right of the Tilantongo dynasty. Every brushstroke is calculated, every glyph a brick in the fortress of legitimacy. But beneath its gilded narrative lies a web of chronological contradictions, gaps and overlaps that suggest history here wasn't just written but ruthlessly edited. Place the Bodley side by side with the Zauch-Nuttall, and the contrasts are stark. Both chronicle the exploits of 8-Deer Jaguar Claw, the famed Mixtec warlord, but where the Zauch-Nuttall revels in his battlefield theatrics, the Bodley sanitizes his rise. That infamous scene of 8-Deer sacrificing his rivals, softened into a ceremonial gesture, his assassination by kin framed as a noble martyrdom. This isn't inconsistency, it's spin doctoring. The Bodley was likely commissioned by 8-Deer's descendants, who needed to reframe their ancestors' bloody ascent as destiny, not butchery. Yet the Codex's real genius lies in its structure. Rather than a linear timeline, it's divided into two parallel narratives, one following Tilantongo's rulers, the other tracking the rival Joltepec dynasty. This side-by-side format isn't just artistic flair, it's a power move, visually asserting Tilantongo's dominance by literally overshadowing Joltepec on the page. The scribes even used color psychology. Tilantongo's rulers glow in regal reds and golds, while Joltepec's figures fade into muted browns as if already receding into history's shadows. But the Bodlei's chronology trips over its own ambition. Key events, a marriage here, a coronation there, appear out of sequence when cross-referenced with other codices. At first glance, these seem like scribble errors. Look closer, though, and a pattern emerges. The mistakes always favor Tilantongo. A politically inconvenient defeat gets shifted to a less prominent page. A rival's birth date is nudged earlier, implying his lineage was aging into irrelevance. These weren't oversights, they were tactics. Mixtec scribes understood something modern politicians know all too well: control the timeline, and you control the truth. The most tantalizing puzzle, the Codex's abrupt hiatus. Midway through, the narrative stalls, leaving later pages eerily blank. Some scholars argue this reflects a real dynastic collapse, perhaps Tilantongo's fall to the Aztecs. Others spy something subtler, a deliberate pause, as if the scribes were waiting for history to catch up to their propaganda. After all, why commit to an ending when you might yet rewrite it? Today, the Bodley sits in Oxford's vaults, its deerskin pages fragile but its message ferociously intact. It reminds us that history isn't just written by the victors, it's painted by them in colors bright enough to blind us to the blood beneath. And that's what makes it so unnervingly modern, because in an age of curated narratives and selective memory, the Bodlei's lessons feel less like ancient history and more like a mirror. The Codex Egerton sits in the British Museum's vaults like an orphan puzzle, a breathtaking yet enigmatic Mesoamerican manuscript with no known birthplace, no clear lineage, and no record of how it crossed an ocean to end up in European hands. Unlike the Borgia or Vaticanus, whose origins scholars can at least debate, this codex floats in historical limbo. Its very name is borrowed from a former owner, the Earl of Egerton, as if the manuscript itself resists categorization. But within its 28 painted pages lies a visual battlefield where Mixtec and Aztec styles clash so fiercely that even the world's top specialists can't agree. Whose gods are these? Whose history do these pigments tell? One glance at the Egerton's pages reveals why it defies easy classification. Take the depiction of the rain god Tlaloc, his signature goggle eyes and jaguar fangs unmistakably Aztec. Yet turn the page and you're staring at a Mixtec-style royal marriage scene, the bride's elaborate headdress woven with glyphs unique to Oaxacan codices. The palettes deepen the mystery. The Egerton's vibrant reds and blues mirror known Aztec pigments cochineal and Maya blue, but its brushwork has the delicate precision of Mixtec scribes. This isn't just a hybrid, it's a chameleon, shifting identities depending on which page you scrutinize. Theories about its origins swing like a pendulum. Some scholars, like art historian Elizabeth Boone, point to the year bundle glyphs tied to Aztec calendar cycles. Others, including Mixtec expert Martin Jansen, counter that the ceremonial costumes align with pre-Aztec Mixtec murals at Mitla. The debate isn't academic hair-splitting, it's a fight over cultural ownership. If Aztec, the Egerton could reflect imperial propaganda, perhaps a conquered Mixtec artist forced to adopt Tenochtitlan's visual language. If Mixtec, it might showcase deliberate imitation, a diplomatic gesture to powerful Aztec neighbors. Then there's the haunting question of erasure. Infrared scans reveal patches where glyphs were scraped away and repainted, as if someone tried to rewrite history. One altered section shows a war scene where victor and vanquished seem to switch places under layered ink. Was this revisionism a scribe's survival tactic under Aztec rule? or proof of a Mixtec community preserving its identity under colonial pressure. The truth may lie in the Codex's most cryptic page, a cosmic diagram where two serpents, one Aztec, one Mixtec, coil around the same tree, their tails knotted like a DNA helix. It's either a vision of synthesis or a silent scream about impossible divides. What gives the Egerton its aching poignancy isn't just the scholarly squabbles. It's the realization that every stroke of its brush was a negotiation between artists and conquerors, between memory and survival. Today, as Mexican curators petition for its repatriation, the Codex's ambiguity feels eerily prescient. A manuscript that refuses to declare allegiance might just be the perfect relic for our fractured modern world. The Codex Porfirio Diaz isn't just a relic, it's a legal weapon, a desperate bid for survival inked onto bark paper by Mixtec scribes fighting to prove their land wasn't for the taking. Created in the chaotic decades after the Spanish conquest, this manuscript is a masterclass in cultural adaptation, where indigenous glyphs and European legal jargon collide in a high-stakes drama of colonial courts and stolen territory. Unlike the Borgia's celestial battles or the Zouch Nuttall's dynastic sagas, the Porfirio Diaz is raw pragmatism. Its pages don't celebrate gods or kings, they document cornfields, boundary markers, and the names of ancestors who had tilled the same soil for centuries. This was history with a purpose, to prove in a courtroom under foreign rule that these lands were never the conquerors to claim. Zoom in on its illustrations, and you'll spot the ingenious stratagems of a people playing a rigged game. A typical page might show a mountain rendered in traditional Mixtec-style jagged lines, dotted with sacred caves but labeled with a Nahuatl place name, the lingua franca of Spanish administrators. Nearby, a Franciscan friar stands awkwardly beside a Mixtec elder, their hands clasped over a sheaf of maize. It's a visual sleight of hand. By including the friar, the scribes lent their claim an air of colonial legitimacy, while the maize screamed indigenous stewardship. These weren't naive drawings, they were legal arguments in pigment, crafted to exploit Spain's own bureaucratic obsession with paperwork. The irony, the very conquerors who dismissed indigenous writing as primitive now demanded it as evidence of land grants. Yet the Codex's most heartbreaking layers lie in its silences. Cross-referencing it with Spanish land records reveals glaring omissions, whole swaths of territory forgotten in the Mixtec version. Were these honest mistakes or deliberate exclusions to shield sacred sites from colonial eyes? One telling section shows a river bend marked by a cross, a clear post-conquest addition. But infrared imaging reveals an earlier glyph beneath it, a coiled serpent, the Mixtec symbol for divine water rights. The message was clear: the land might wear a Christian mask, but its soul remained indigenous. Survival came at a cost. The scribes, likely trained in pre-Hispanic traditions, had to master foreign concepts like property deeds and royal titles. Their solution, a fusion language of symbolism. Dates were written in the Mixtec calendar but annotated with Spanish years. Ancestors were depicted wearing both feathered headdresses and Christian halos. Even the materials betrayed compromised European inks bleeding into traditional cochineal reds, as if the very pigments were negotiating peace. The Codex's namesake, Porfirio Diaz, the infamous Mexican dictator who later owned it, never grasped its true significance. To him, it was a curiosity, a trophy of a vanquished culture. But modern Mixtec activists see it differently. For them, the manuscript is a blueprint for resistance, proving that even under siege, their ancestors weaponized memory. Today, as land disputes still rage in Oaxaca's courts, some communities dust off old codices, not as museum pieces, but as living titles to a future their forebears fought to secure. The Porfirio Diaz isn't just a record of loss, it's a testament to the stubborn truth that ink can outlast empires. The Codex Kingsborough doesn't just document history, it screams it. Created around 1550, in the smoldering aftermath of the Spanish conquest, This manuscript is a legal grenade lobbed straight at the heart of colonial oppression. Unlike the celestial mysteries of the Borgia or the dynastic epics of the Zouch Nuttall, the Kingsborough is a ledger of raw defiance. Its pages tremble with the grievances of indigenous communities in Tepetlayastock, a Nahua town brutalized by the encomienda system, a form of legalized slavery disguised as protection. Here, scribes didn't paint gods or kings. They painted stolen harvests, broken bodies, and the names of children worked to death in Spanish mines. This wasn't art. It was evidence. What makes the Kingsborough extraordinary isn't just its content, but its audacity. The Codex was crafted explicitly for a Spanish courtroom, a tactical move by Nahua leaders who realized the colonizers' own legal system might be turned against them. Every illustration is a calculated blow. One scene shows indigenous farmers bent double under baskets of corn, their quotas impossibly high, while Spanish encomenderos lounge beneath parasols. Another depicts a mother clutching the limp form of her son, his skeletal frame labeled with the cause of death, labor in the silver pits. The artists didn't bother with subtlety. They weaponized visual storytelling, knowing European judges might dismiss Nahuatl testimony but couldn't ignore the stark human agony in pigment. Yet the Codex's genius lies in its duality. While it condemns Spanish cruelty, it also showcases indigenous resilience. Scattered among the scenes of abuse are meticulous records of pre-Hispanic land boundaries measured not in colonial leagues but in ancestral units like the Semitole, the distance a person could walk before resting. These weren't just property lines, they were declarations. We were here before you. We remember. Even the palette whispers resistance. The scribes used traditional Mesoamerican reds and ochres, but for Spanish figures they employed a sickly, washed-out yellow, a visual demotion, stripping the conquerors of dignity in the very medium they couldn't decipher. The Kingsborough's afterlife is as dramatic as its creation. Somehow, it survived the Spanish legal machinery intact, only to vanish for centuries before resurfacing in the library of the Earl of Kingsborough, a 19th-century nobleman obsessed with proving Mexico's indigenous roots. Today, scholars pore over its pages for clues about daily resistance under colonial rule. Infrared scans reveal hidden annotations where scribes scribbled marginalia in Nahuatl, likely translations of oral testimonies too dangerous to commit to the main text. One barely visible note reads, "They take the corn but not the memory of how to grow it." To flip through the Kingsborough is to witness the birth of a tradition, where codices, once vessels of sacred knowledge, became shields against erasure. It's a theme echoed in modern movements like Mexico's Zapatista uprising, where indigenous communities still wield ancestral land maps in court battles. The Codex reminds us that the greatest threat to power isn't always a sword. Sometimes it's a scribe's brush loaded with the indelible ink of truth. These 30 enigmatic codices are more than just ancient manuscripts, they're time machines, each one a shimmering window into worlds we've barely begun to understand. From the Voynich's unreadable botanical riddles to the Mendoza's painful colonial collisions, these books defy the notion that history is a settled record. They pulse with contradictions, whispering secrets in languages we're still struggling to decode, illustrated with visions that defy logic. The Aztec scribes who smuggled their gods into the margins of the Maglebciano, the Mixtec dynasties who etched their lineage into the Vindobonensis as if ink could outlast empires. They all understood something we're only now rediscovering. Knowledge isn't just written, it's fought for, hidden, and sometimes written in invisible ink. Think about the sheer audacity of these texts. The Ripley scrolls turned alchemy into a visual poem, while the Codex Gigas fused piety and horror under the shadow of its demonic portrait. Every manuscript is a rebellion against forgetting. Even the act of preservation was radical, like the Nahua artists of the Orban, documenting their people's suffering under conquest with raw, unvarnished grief. These weren't passive scribes, they were archivists of the endangered, cartographers of the invisible. And their work challenges us to ask how much of history is still tucked away in vaults or plastered over like the Selden, waiting for the right technology or the right eyes to bring it back into the light. So here's the real question these codices leave us with. Which one haunts you? Is it the cosmic clockwork of the Fejavari Mayor or the tragic courtroom drama of the Kingsborough? Maybe the Codex Seraphinianus, with its surreal modern echoes, makes you wonder what future scholars will think of our strangest creations. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear which manuscript pulled you deepest into the labyrinth. And if you're hungry for more journeys into history's shadowy corners, hit subscribe, because somewhere out there another codex is waiting to be cracked open, and who knows? The next great discovery might just unfold right here.